Hi students, welcome back. We are in the chapter how do organisms reproduce. Okay, so in this chapter till now we have finished up to the structure of different parts of the flower and what is unisexual flower and what is bisexual flower and what are the different parts in flower and what is the function of different parts of flower. Today let us see what do we mean by pollination. Okay, pollination. So pollination, it is just the transfer of pollens. We can say transfer of pollens, that is pollen grains from the anther of stamen. Okay, from the anther of stamen to where? Yes, to the stigma of carpel. Okay, this transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma in case of in case of angiosperms, we call it as pollination. Okay, so this pollination, since we have unisexual flowers also, we have bisexual flowers also. Unisexual flowers means the flower which is having only one, either it can be having this stamen or it can be having carpel only. And the bisexual flower means in which both stamen and carpel is present. Okay, so the pollen grains are transferred by many agents. There are different agents which help us in the transfer of pollen grains, such as it can be insects. Okay, we can have insects. We can, such as for example in insects, bees are there, honeybees and butterflies. Okay, butterflies are there. So these are the insect agents which help in the transfer of the pollens from anther to the stigma. Then we can have sometimes birds also. Birds also help in, sometimes even humans are also involved. We can have wind and we can have water. So these are the different agents by which this transfer of pollen grains by which the transfer of pollen grains can take place from the anther to the stigma. Okay, so based on the whether it is a unisexual flower or a bisexual flower, we can say sometimes there is a concept called we have two types of pollinations now. One is self-pollination, okay, and the second one is cross-pollination. In self-pollination, we see that the transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the flower takes place in the same flower or another flower of the same plant. Okay, from this pollen grain is there, it has to reach to the stigma. Okay, pollen grain has to reach to the stigma. It can take place where we can see the self-pollination means we have the common plant here. Okay, we have the common plant. For example, within this plant only the pollens of the same plant are transferred to the stigma of the same plant. Okay, pollens from the anther of same plant are transferred to the stigma of the same plant. It can be a unisexual flower there. It can be the it is always the case in bisexual flower. Okay, so in which from one pollen of the one flower can be transferred to the other stigma of the same plant, same other flower. Okay, so this can be, it is seen in P. The example for this is P, that is PS, and we see this type of pollination in China rose. China pea plant and China rose plant, these are the examples of self-pollination. So hope you understand what is self-pollination. Self-pollination means in which the is a type of pollination where the transfer of pollen grains from the anther of a flower to the stigma of the same flower or to the stigma of other flower on the same plant takes place. Okay, plant is not changed here. Okay, so there are various advantages also for this self-pollination, and there are some disadvantages also. Let us talk about the advantages. What are the advantages which we can see in case of this self-pollination? Self-pollination in bisexual flowers ensures continuity of race. Continuity of race. Okay, it is very important in case of bisexual flowers. Okay, it helps us to preserve the parental characters. The parental characters are preserved. What do you mean by this? The parental characters, that is means the parental, that is the same plant, its characters are maintained when the seed formation takes place, and its same characters are transferred to the new progeny, that is the daughter plant. Okay, then it is necessary for flowers to produce the nectar or scent or to be colorful. So for self-pollination, the flower should be having nectar, it has to produce nectar, then it has to be colorful also. Okay, it has to produce the nectar or scent, and it has to be colorful also. This is the case. This is one of the we can see in case of self-pollination, it is not necessary for the flower to produce the nectar or to produce the scent and to be colorful. Okay, because it is self-pollination on the same plant, there is no more migration of the polleners to other plant. Okay, that is why there is no necessity of having the scent or nectar or the color of the flowers, colorful flowers. Okay, then there are some disadvantages also. Actually, new varieties cannot be produced here. Okay, new varieties we cannot see in case of self-pollination. Not only this, but the genetic defects of the breed cannot be removed. If there is any genetic defect, that is DNA defect is there, okay, in its breed, it cannot be removed because we are not able to move to the other plant. Okay, it is self-pollination. And second thing is, when there is a continuous self-pollination, when we see the pollination in the same plant continuously, it is going on, there is a problem coming, that is called loss of vigor. Loss of vigor will be there. Loss of vigor. That, what does this mean? It means that the originality of the plant is no more. Okay, the originality of the plant, what the plant has the strength, and what were the main characters because of which this plant was actually useful for us, those characters they just diffuse out. Ibrahim mat karo, they just diffuse out. Okay, then next is cross-pollination. In cross-pollination means what? It is the transfer of pollen grains. Here the pollen grains are transferred. Ibrahim, light up gai khatam. The pollen grains, here the transfer of pollen grains takes place from the anther of one flower, okay, anther of flower number 1, to the stigma of another flower, to the stigma of other flowers, flower number 2, for example here. Okay, of the different plant, this is very important. Different plant, not the same plant. Okay, to the flower of the different plant it takes place. Okay, then what happens actually, it is of the same species. The species is same, we know that species should be same, otherwise pollination will not take place. It is not possible for pollination. It is common in the majority of the flowers. For example, cross pollination occurs with the help of two main groups of the pollinators. Those pollinators, we can call it as they are biotic, they can be biotic. Okay, they can be biotic, such as biotic means which are living things. Okay, such as insects can be involved here, birds also. Okay, and even man. So these are the different biotic agents for such pollination of in case of cross pollination. Okay, and it can be abiotic. Abiotic means which is non-living thing, that is wind and water. These are the abiotic factors which help in the cross pollination. Okay, now in cross pollination also we have some advantages here. Let us discuss about the advantages of this cross pollination. Okay. What are the what are the advantages of cross pollination? It results in healthier offsprings. Offspring means the new plant that is the output of this cross pollination. Okay, more healthier new plants will come because of this cross pollination. Then the seeds which are produced here, okay, these seeds are better they have the better germinating capacity. Okay, then we have one more advantage here. More variables are possible here. More abundant variables means the varieties is possible. Variables that is the varieties also possible here by this, that is called a variation. We say variations are possible by this cross pollination, and the seeds which are produced here, they are more viable. Okay, viable means they are we can germinate. Okay, abundant and viable, we have seeds here. Then there are some disadvantages also in case of cross pollination. We can see the plants which are here, they are dependent on the external source. For example, we talked about abiotic and biotic sources: insects, birds, man, wind, water. If these things are not available, cross pollination will not take place. For example, if you have the apple garden and this is the season, for example, for pollination now, if suddenly temperature becomes very less, okay, and there is no way of wind, or we can say no more insects can fly in the air. So what happens, these insects which were flies, like flies we have, which were the main source of this pollination in case of apple, because they cannot move, movement is now no more, because of that pollination will not take place, so there will be less production in the apple. Okay, so this is one of the disadvantage here. Okay, the next thing is the pollen grains have to be produced in large amount. Yeah, there should be more number of pollen grains here present. Why? Because there will be more loss also. It has to wait for the insects, okay, for pollens to be mature, and that is also a limited time is there when the pollen will be mature. Okay, within that time only insect has to come, it has to transfer it. Okay, so that is why it has to produce the more and more pollen, so that wind, water, birds, man can come anytime. When they are in contact means that time it is possibility of pollination. So in this way it has to produce more number of pollens. This is also one of the important what is a disadvantage we can see in case of cross pollination. Okay students, we will see now some terms. For example, what do we mean by gamete? Okay, gamete, these are terms which are involved in the fertilization. Now gamete, a gamete is a cell. It is a cell, it can be male or female, which is involved in sexual reproduction. That is why when we talk about gamete, a cell, sexual reproduction, it means it can be male gamete, we can have male gamete, or we can have a female gamete. Two types of gametes can be present there. Okay, the male gamete, in case of animals we call it as sperm. Okay, and or we call it as spermatozoon, but the female gamete in case of animals we call it as ovum, or we call it as egg. Okay, so gametes are of two types. It can be male gamete, we say it in case of animals we call it as sperm, and the female gamete also can be there, then it's called ovum, or we call it as egg. Okay, then what happens when both the gametes, that is plus gamete, and that is male and female gamete, this is male gamete and this is female gamete, when they fuse together, okay, finally when they fuse together, they give rise to a cell. That cell is diploid means this male gamete and female gamete, they will be having half the number of chromosomes. Okay, half number of chromosomes. This is half, this is half. When the both two halves they join together, they fuse together, these two cells, okay, inside or outside the body, so it results in a cell that is diploid. Diploid means it is having the two sets of chromosome from two gametes. Okay, that cell is called zygote. Now what is zygote? The zygote, it is a cell which is formed by the fusion of male and female gamete. Okay, so it is nothing, it is a fertilized ovum. Fertilized ovum, or we call it as fertilized egg. Fertilized ovum or fertilized egg. Okay, so now next, when the zygote is there, the zygote cell, it does not remain as it is, it has to divide. Now the zygote will start dividing. Finally at a stage, this fertilized egg, what happens actually, we use the term next to the zygote, we use the term embryo. What is embryo? Embryo is the stage of the development between the zygote or fertilized egg and the newly formed offspring. Okay, this is zygote, embryo, then we will be having one offspring. Offspring means new plant or new animal that comes after the fusion of this. So the in between developing stage of this zygote to become the well developed offspring. In between it is called embryo. Now one more term we will use here. What do we mean by fertilization? What is fertilization? As we discussed here, fertilization means the stage, it is defined as the fusion of the male and female gamete, to form a zygote during the sexual reproduction. So it is the fusion of male and female gamete. okay, to form what? Which results in zygote. Okay, good. So in case of plants, we need to discuss about how does fertilization take place in case of plants. So fertilization in plants. I am here. I will just draw the small diagram in which I want to show that how does this fertilization take place in the plants. Okay. In case of plants, you know that this is stigma. Okay, this is stigma, the uppermost part of this the uppermost part of the this no part the what is a female part of the, that is gynoecium. So we have here what happens actually. So from the anther, the pollen has to come, and this is the site for pollens to fall down, where pollination will take place. Okay. When pollen grain is there, this pollen grain which is available here, when it falls down here, suppose this was one pollen grain like this, it is coming in air or by any other source, it is coming and is falling here. Now what happens actually, the pollen grain, it starts germinating here. So germinating means it is called formation of pollen sac. Okay, it produces a track for it, so by which the two cells which are present inside it, they start moving, and where they have to reach, this is the ovary part. Okay, this is the stigma and ovary. They have to reach ovary, and inside ovary, as we have discussed earlier, that there is what, this ovule is inside the ovary. Ovule can be like this structure. Okay, inside the ovule we have an egg cell and some accessory cells also. Okay, what are these cells? These we will discuss in the later classes. Okay, so here you see that the pollen here, so it starts forming the pollen tube. This is called a pollen tube. See, I am drawing here, this is called a pollen tube. Okay, pollen tube formation takes place here now. Okay, so this pollen tube, it will go and it will go directly, it will go to the calyzal end. Okay, and it will reach to the ovule. Okay, here what happens, the pollen cells also, the pollen cell which is present inside here in this is, for example, this is the male germ cell. This male germ cell or male gamete, it has to reach to the egg, okay, for fertilization and fusion. Okay, so here we have this cavity, it is called what, this is the embryo sac. Okay, overall structure we got is ovule and it is embryo sac. Here we have the egg cell. Okay, egg cell is present here, the pollen started germinating here. Okay, so what happens actually, the pollination is followed by the fertilization in the plants. Okay, after the pollen lands on the suitable stigma here, it has to reach the female germ cells present in the ovary. Okay, the pollen tube here starts growing out of the pollen grain through the style to reach the ovary. Okay, after fertilization, when it reaches here, this male germ cell reaches here and fertilization takes place. Okay, when the fertilization takes place here, the zygote now which is produced, the zygote, it divides several times to form an embryo. So this zygote divides several times to form the embryo within the ovule. This is the ovule. This structure we call it as ovule. Okay, the ovule, then what happens is the outside of the ovule, okay, the surface of the ovule, finally it results in a tough coat. This ovule forms the tough coat outside, that is covering so which develops into the seed. Okay, inside the seed we have a small embryo. You might have seen a mustard seed is not possible. You might have seen different grains are there. In those grains, if you just watch it very carefully, you will finally come to know there is a small plantlet present in it. Okay, now the seed which is present with us, which is having a small embryo, this seed contains the future embryo in it, which develops into the seedling. So this will develop into the seedling like this. I am going to make it. This is a small plant which starts growing out, okay, of this, okay, from this seed. The ovary develops and ripens to form the fruit. This part of the ovary, this ovary, it forms the fruit finally. Okay, it ripens and forms the fruit. So the apple, mango, whatever you are eating the ovary. Okay, it is the ovary. It is not the true fruit. This no. We have in higher class we will see what is the true fruit and what is the false fruit. The fruit that develops other than ovary we call it as false fruit, but the fruit that develops from the ovary it is called true fruit. Okay, true fruit. So mango you are eating means you are eating the ovary actually. Okay, the seed, the embryo that is inside it. Now we have here actually when the fertilization takes place, here the process of double fertilization occurs inside each embryo sac. Double fertilization means what? Because when the pollen grain was there, this pollen grain, inside the pollen grain we have two cells. Okay, we have two cells. One cell is male germ cell and other cell is called vegetative cell. Vegetative cell and other is called a generative cell. Vegetative cell and a generative cell. One cell goes and it fuses with the egg, so that results in the zygote and finally in the embryo. But the other cell that goes and that fuses with the two cells which are present inside here cell. Okay, so it means two fusions takes place. That is why it is called a double fertilization. Double fertilization. Double fertilization takes place inside the ovule, in which two fusions like syngamy and triple fusion takes place. We call it as syngamy and triple fusion. Syngamy means what? When one of the pollen that is the male germ cell, it goes and fuses with the egg cell, it is called syngamy. Okay, the triple fusion means what? When the other cell comes and it has to fuse with the two cells which are present inside this embryo sac. Okay, so that is why it is called a triple fusion. Okay, so it takes place when one male gamete fuses with the egg containing in the embryo sac of the ovule. So we call it as this is called a syngamy, and this syngamy it results in the production of the zygote. As we discussed, the another male gamete fuses with the two polar nuclei which are present inside this embryo sac, and it is called a triple fusion. Where three nuclei, why triple fusion means because three nuclei are involved in the fusion. Okay, so that is why it is called a triple fusion. So one male gamete and to this, then we have the germination stage. Germination, it is the germination. What do we mean by germination? Germination is nothing. Germination means it is the Germination means it is the initial stage of the growth of the seed to develop in the seedling under appropriate conditions. Okay, when the seed will start producing the seedling, so that stage we call it as germination. So with this we have finished our pollination and how does pollination take place in the plants. So let's conclude today. Students, I will meet you in the next session, inshallah.